I don't know. I feel like I can't stop this until there's been some big results to justify. It's like the sunken cost fallacy. The more time I spend in it, the bigger result I need before I can get out.
You've been tremendous on this. I mean, you've called things out. You've unearthed things so much that have been picked on by others, and that you yourself have broken. So, I mean, you have an entire country right now that's for the first time, probably in a very, very, very long time, is facing its past in this.
Welcome back to episode 3 of the Bandera Lobby Show. This week we'll continue with this Nazigate scandal, as people are calling it in Canada, and maybe we'll touch on what you might call the Nazigate before Nazigate in Philadelphia. So I'm super happy to be joined by really the perfect person to talk about both of these issues as the journalist who first reported on both of these stories. Lev Golinkin is a journalist who you may have read some of his articles in The Forward, The Nation, and New York Times. Thank you, Lev, so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me, man.
The Forward recently published an article about you to introduce you, and I think gave a great introduction. They said our contributor Lev Golinkin is always looking for Nazis. He's been pretty busy lately.
I think you'll appreciate. I think that same thing could go for you, man. Like sometimes I feel like we're the two people who are the most. We find a new monument, and it's like Lev and Moss are like fireworks are going off. Uh, we get so excited on it.
Do you want to start with this? Just before we started recording, you sent me this latest article you've written.
Yeah. So to I don't know how much folks listening to catch up, but for years and years and years and years, there was a dark side of Canada that people didn't talk about. And when people like Moss Ropes and Lev Golinkin and others would talk about it, would just kind of get shunted off as these Russian propagandists, as like putting out these crazy theories. Um, and even though Canada just kept honoring Nazi and Nazi collaborators in various ways, it was just in the open and it was okay to do so. And then last Friday, the Canadian Parliament gave a standing ovation to a man who fought in a Waffen-SS unit in a Ukrainian Waffen-SS unit with a long track record of war crimes. And I think Moss, I don't know about you, but like I'm stunned at the fact that people actually cared about this, that this provoked a backlash. Because like one of my co-authors asked me, she said, what do you think this man, this 90-year-old man's son, who put him in, who put him on the spotlight, what do you think he was doing, risking his father like that? And I'm like, allow me to assure you, the notion that his father would be anything but honored did not even cross his mind.
Mm.
Like, why would it? Like this is Canada. This is where Nazis get celebrated. Like it's why would anybody do anything other than say thank you? So I think it was a shock. I'm still trying to get over it. I still think it's surreal.
Can you talk about because you wrote an article, I think 2020 was it, for the Nation on Canada's Nazi monuments? What kind of response did you get from that article, or was it like crickets?
It was crickets, and even as I wrote it, like I think I said, there was somebody vandalized a monument to the Waffen SS, to this Ukrainian SS unit, and the police called it a hate crime. Okay, since the Nazis were the victims here. Okay, it was a hate crime against the Nazi the Nazi identity. Okay, so. And I wrote about it, and I remember, like, I said, we only know about this thanks to four people, Moss Robeson, Per Anders Rudling, the Swedish professor who's like the number one expert in Galician, David Pugliese and Scott Taylor, who are the journalists who've been reporting about this. And one of the things I said is, like, Jewish organizations have been quiet about this. Some have spoken out, but in general, they've been pretty quiet. And I think it's just how strong the Ukrainian Canadian diaspora, and I should clarify, when I say diaspora, you and I are talking about, there's plenty of Canadian Ukrainians who are not fans of these Banderites and who are not fans of these SS Galicia people, but the ultra-nationalist diaspora, the ones who are fans of them, they're very, very strong and very vicious and very vocal. So
Not recently though.
yeah,
Recently they've been pretty quiet.
recently they've been shocked, man. I don't know who's more shocked, them or us, or you know what I mean. Like, so a handful of people have been talking about this, and even when it's in your face, and even when it's like, oh my God, you have a Nazi monument on your soil, a land that lost 45,000 fighting the Nazis, nobody cares. It was crickets, And then finally, after my article, B'nai B'rith came out and they said, we're against this, and they've been really good about this going forward. And then friends of Simon Wiesenthal were like the only ones who, from the very beginning, they've been outspoken about this. They've been really, really good. But yeah, I was just like, even writing this article, I had no illusions about, and I'm usually a pretty optimistic guy, but I had no illusions about there being any difference, because the entire, I mean, Chrystia Freeland lied about her. Let me put it this way: like Andrew, the ex-speaker of Parliament, Anthony Rota, this Friday, a week ago, he spent 30 seconds turning this Nazi collaborator, this Nazi, into a hero. Okay, and because of that, his career is done. He resigned from the speakership. He's done. Okay. And Chrystia Freeland spent years turning her Nazi collaborator grandfather into a hero. And when she was caught lying about it, she just shrugged it off and blamed Russia and walked away with her head high. So I was stunned. I didn't think it was going to be. I didn't think this was going to happen at all. I'm still shocked about it. Like, I'm still waiting for them to be like, just kidding, bring Kuka back. Bring him back, you guy. We got you, man. We really love you.
And you've been writing about this stuff for a very long time too. I mean, when did it start? Was it 2014 for you?
Yeah, 2014 and 2015. Yeah. 2015 is when Ukraine passed laws making all these people heroes and making it illegal to deny to cast aspersions on their heroism. And I'm from Eastern Ukraine, and the thing that I'm hitting on every podcast and everything I say is, 99% of Ukraine fought against the Nazis. 99% of Ukraine, these people are. Why would they celebrate these people? These people are traitors to them. Almost every family in Ukraine lost relatives in World War II. And these. So it's crazy that these people are portrayed as heroes. They're not. And it's just seeing this like tail, it's been the tail wagging the dog, you know what I mean? It's been a small group of people. This is by far not a perfect analogy, but it would be as if, like, somebody from Alabama went to the White House and then proceeded to turn the Confederates into national heroes and proceeded to make national legislation saying these people are heroes across all of America, blah, 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 blah. It's like, it's not a perfect analogy because a much bigger percentage of America likes the Confederacy than Ukraine likes these people. This is just a very, very small percentage in very western region of Ukraine. But it's seeing this, and then I was just shocked that this was happening and nobody cared. And then as I was covering far-right rallies, I was reporting on them in just various other places. I started noticing a pattern where everywhere you see these angry men with marches, with torches and screaming for this golden fascist past, you also saw statues of Nazi collaborators. You also saw this revisionism. And it was just, this entire pattern was exactly the same, and it was just coming up everywhere, from Spain to France to Italy to the Baltics. So eventually I kind of fell down the same rabbit hole you did, I think, and we're still tumbling down it.
I don't consider myself an expert, but I feel like
me neither.
I regret that I could have been. Maybe if I had started learning Ukrainian 10 years ago, I could be doing all kinds of stuff, but then I'd be stuck and I'd be doing this for the rest of my life. And
yeah.
I don't know that I actually want to dedicate my whole life to these people. But let's talk about um, the I guess original breakthrough, um, and when you first became, I think, pleasantly surprised with the reaction in Philadelphia. Um, so
Yeah,
can you talk? Can you
yeah,
talk a bit about the pre-Nazigate in Philadelphia?
yeah. Well, it starts with you, man.
Well,
It's
sorry, I'm not trying to.
no, no, no. But I mean, it literally starts with you in this particular way because you unearthed our buddy who was who was nice enough, OUM guy who was nice enough to take a photo with this monument. I'm kicking myself because I live close to this, and it's like you always look, the last place you look is always the one right by you. Um, so it turns out, like, I thought I had all the Ukrainian monuments mapped, and it turned out you found one in Philly, thanks to the OUN leader who took a photo with it, and it's a really impressive monument. Um, and it has so to set the stage, I mean, this is a cemetery, and the cemetery in very close to Philly, and it has row after row after row of tombstones, all of which have the SS Galicia logo, the SS Galicia insignia. And in front of this all is this big cross with SS Galicia insignia. And in English, it says free, fighters for Ukraine's freedom. And in Ukrainian, it says the good stuff is in Ukrainian, where it says, the first Ukrainian division. Um, and, you know, again, this was my first big shock that um, I didn't think this was going to make any, like, so much of this can't happen without the media attention and without the Jewish groups, because without the Jewish groups condemning it, people aren't going to pay attention, because it's like this is the people whose job it is to say, listen, there's a problem. And without them saying it, it's very hard to move things. And I was delighted to see that the various regional groups in Philadelphia just started speaking out. As far as I know, the Detroit groups are still silent on this because Detroit has a smaller monument, but it's still a Waffen-SS monument. Um, but the Philadelphia one, I think, especially because it has the insignia, the SS insignia on it, Jewish groups began speaking out and began saying, what's going on. And the church, I think, in the beginning tried to kind of push it off by giving the usual excuses that these people they didn't fight for the Germans, they fought against the Soviets, blah blah blah. But in all of I've spoken with the various Jewish community leaders there, and they've just been like, it's almost been like a emperor's new clothes type thing. It's just been like, they're like, yeah, this is horrible. Why is it here? This should not be here. Um, and I've always, like, in speaking with just to Jewish organizations, Jewish federations, everyday people get it. You don't really have to be, you tell them and they're like, yeah, this is horrible. This is garbage. The difference was this needed to get out there, and the Philadelphia Inquirer was phenomenal because they picked up, and this is like the paper in Philly and the surrounding region, and they picked it up and they did a couple of great stories on it. So, you discovered it, you tweeted it out. As a result, then I did the forward story, then the Inquirer piled it, and then local news organizations like Fox and CBS, I think, covered it. The Jewish organizations are speaking about this, various other smaller Jewish groups and local media. And, as a result, it got, I hope we can show this to the listeners. This was great. So, you tweeted out how it started, how it's going with the monument, and how it started there being nice and shiny and placed, just displayed, and then the church boarded it up with basically a rectangular crate over it. Okay, and this is a large monument. So they did that. But then I thought the funniest thing was afterwards, like within a few days, somebody covered that over with a Ukrainian flag and with flowers. So they went right back to covering it. But I think what the church said, and I have no reason not to believe them, they said it was just like parishioners and people. It's came and did it. I don't think the church did it. It's I think it's just people came to the cemetery and they're free to leave flowers and stuff. So, um,
Can you share any updates on well, so that story came out just over a month ago, the original article you wrote about this.
well,
And
you tweeted about this in May.
sure, but
Yeah, and then that was the first time that was reported on Twitter. My story came out in about a month ago, and then this started getting picked up. And
but the most recent were they with the update about them temporarily covering it up.
yes,
Um, there was it mentioned that there was going to be a meeting
yeah,
later at the month.
yeah, and then so there was a meeting. I wasn't there, but from what I understand, from what based on just that a couple of sources are telling me, um, it went better than expected. I think the church also, the Philadelphia area Jewish community has done a ton for Ukraine with this war. They've really gone to bat. They've raised over like $1 million. They have really partnered with the organizations. So I think, and this the group that owns this, and again, something I don't know how much listeners know about it, but it's the entity that we're talking about here is the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, and that is a subsect. It's kind of its own thing, but it's still under the Vatican in general. It's almost like a franchise group of the Vatican. Um, but so they're and they're very much, they were born on the border between Poland and Ukraine, the a Catholic place and an Orthodox place, and they're a marriage of the two. They're what's called in communion with the Vatican. But if you look at them, if you look at their churches, they look like an Orthodox church. So it's this marriage of the two traditions, and this church played a very crucial role. This branch of the Christian faith played a very crucial role in creating SS Galicia, and they had SS Galicia was one of the few places that had chaplains assigned to it from the in the SS. The Nazis generally did not want any competition for ideology, so they did not allow chaplains in their SS units, and the only exceptions were a Flemish unit, a Bosnian unit that had imams, and SS Galicia, because the Nazis realized that they could not create this without the green light, without the support of the church. So, and then this church, the Philadelphia church, has a graveyard, and in the graveyard is this numerous graves plus the monument itself. I think right now, I mean, the basic message that I got from people who attended this meeting is, that the monument has been there for 30 years. It didn't go up overnight, and it's not going to come down overnight. I think it's a question of, and this is something I very much respect, I think it's a question of a church needing to do the right thing. Also, and I'm sure you've run into this before, these people have kids and grandkids and now great grandkids, and I'm sure you've seen this before. There's a whole bunch of people who are raised to consider these SS fighters as heroes, and I think there's a lot of them who genuinely truly believe it. They've just been raised to say that all of this war crimes is just communist garbage, all of this is lies. These people, and I'm sure that a lot of these people didn't just like goose step around their living rooms. They think of themselves as, a kindly grandpa who, went for walks and stuff, and and so you have, the church has to deal with this, and I sympathize with them. They have to deal with that. They have parishioners who don't see these people, who genuinely, honestly don't see these people as SS veterans. They see them as grandma and grandpa and all of this. So, the church has to, the church has to do the right thing. They also have to do the right thing by their parishioners too, by their flock. So I think it's, from what I understand, the church is going to be trying, the church needs to find a solution that's just like, they can't just have a dump truck, towed away. So, and I think like any group understands that too, because I mean, like I said, this is the church is in the spiritual care of these families. It can't just tell them, you know what, everything you've believed is garbage. At the same time, I think, the one thing I told Jewish groups, the one thing that I suggested, when they asked me just about some of the information, they said, listen, like, Ukraine's been tearing down statues of Lenin, of Pushkin, of Gagarin, the cosmonauts and everything. I'm like, if anybody should know what it's like to have statues reminding you of past oppression and how painful that is, it's the Ukrainian community. So, I am very optimistic, much more than I thought I would be, because Jewish groups have spoken out about this, and again, I wasn't at the meeting, but from the little things I was told is, it appears people are actually listening, not just like, we listen to each other and we're going to walk away now. It appears that they actually genuinely are listening. And it also appears like it's hard for me to imagine the pressure that the church is now facing from the diaspora and from, so I think it could be a good resolution. I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but I also don't think it's just going to indefinitely keep going. And I think it could be a really nice moment I think I've told you this before, that there's so many people who fought against the communists and who were not Nazis. There were so many people who were martyred and were actual war victims who were not Nazis. And what I always try to think is what I mean? I try to think of it not as, get rid of this. I try to think of it as why don't you find somebody else to focus on? Why don't you find somebody? Ukraine has so many people that they could focus on who are great. So I found that people usually, they don't just like a nose, you know what I mean? They like more of a what about this? What about that? Why don't you share this with the world? So
Can you talk about the at least attempted intervention from Ukraine by Zizzles and
yeah,
his ilk?
yeah. So there's a small listen. A little while ago, a couple of weeks ago, there was a meeting between certain segments of the African American community and David Duke, who the ex-Klansman, who and it was about the influence of the Jews, the undue influence of the Jews. And so there was these
Wait, seriously?
yeah, I'm not joking. No, please do
This
look.
isn't another Lev Golinkin analogy?
No. It actually is completely legitimate.
Wow.
Okay. There was a meeting announced between this African American small group who thinks David Duke is a pretty good guy. So, you could find, and I remember even during the whole Confederate thing in 2017 or whatever, CNN managed to dig up, an African American guy who was like, I love the Confederate flag, I mean, you could find anybody, you know what I mean? So, and I think maybe a good quote, and I'm misquoting this, but somebody wrote this about Jews. They said, every group of people has their bastards, is entitled to have their bastards, but we also should be calling them out. There is a group that there's a group that's by now it's not even like a group. It's just like 3 or 4 people that are presenting themselves as a group. You know what I mean? Just like I said, you could find enough African Americans who say they're like ex-KKK leader David Duke. You could find anything, But there's a group who portrays themselves as this giant organization. It's called VAAD, VAAD, and just so you understand, in 2018, actual Ukrainian Jewish organizations, like over 30 of them, I think it was like 41 of them or something like that. That would make it over 40. Like dozens of them signed an open letter basically saying that VOD does not speak for us, we do not share its things, and it takes a lot to have all of these people come together and feel the need to air dirty laundry and to condemn essentially one of their own and kick them out. And they did this because VOD just progressively started defending these Holocaust perpetrators, and people, say, why do they do it? I don't particularly care. Like I said, I can find, I don't particularly care whether somebody who's black thinks David Duke is great. I'm sure I can find Jews who think David Duke is great. You know what I mean? Like it's, the world is full of silly things. You know, the problem is the problem is that these people portray themselves as representatives of Ukrainian Jews. And so it's not enough for them to defend the monuments in Ukraine to these people. They also have to defend monuments to them in Philadelphia. You know, they're bothered so much by the idea that Jews in Philadelphia don't want to have a Nazi monument that they started reaching out and sending a letter that was basically just, acting as if they're speaking on behalf of Ukrainian Jews and saying that, this monument is, be careful, this is Russian propaganda. And the only thing they have is screaming Russian propaganda. So they sent these letters to these various Jewish organizations, like on behalf of the Jews of Ukraine, saying that, be careful with these SS Galicia monuments. They're actually not, there's a lot more to it, And like, the one thing that just has driven me insane about this is VOD is routinely in the past, it's been covered by, Ukrainian Jews are split over the legacy of Bandera. And it's like, could you imagine somebody being like, African Americans are split over the Ku Klux Klan. Some think it's evil, others think it's not so bad. Could you imagine any journalist? You would be fired. Your journalistic career would be over if you ever wrote something like that. Okay? And you would have even Jewish agents, Jewish media would be like, Ukrainian Jews are kind of, they come down in two camps over people who murdered them, over Holocaust perpetrators. Some think Holocaust perpetrators aren't that good. Others think that, they may not be so bad. And this was allowed to be published over and over and over. But
do you think this latest effort has fallen flat?
Oh, it has fallen flat, especially because some of my sources said that basically these Jewish organizations that received this from VOD, they were, and I'm not naming names, but I mean, they were understandably, you have letter coming on a letterhead that says we're the biggest Jewish organization in Ukraine. I think they claim to be made up of like 240 different other subgroups, whatever. Which, with enough imagination, you could be made fun of anything. They could say they're the biggest Ukrainian group in the universe, really. So, they put this empty letterhead, basically, and from what I understand, they used to be legitimate. They used to be actually in the early days of Ukraine's independence. They actually used to be a big group that was composed of this, but things have obviously changed. And they have changed even further when in 2018, all of Ukrainian Jewish groups came together and said, these people do not represent us. And again, I just want, it is dangerous always to put out a letter from a community airing your dirty laundry like that, because you do not want to do that. You really do not want to be you really don't want to give wedge issues. So it should tell you a lot that all these groups felt the need to come together and say these people do not represent us. That is not something that's done lightly. Okay, so our friends at VOD, they contacted these American Philadelphia area Jewish groups, and understandably, these Philadelphia area Jewish groups felt, and I don't want to be speaking for them, but my take is they certainly felt concerned, because it looks like Ukrainian Jews are telling them, whoa, 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 you got to pump the brakes. You're barking up the wrong tree. This is, this Waffen-SS group really isn't that bad. Blah, 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 blah. You got to think of this and this, So, and again, I'm just paraphrasing all of this. So that happened. And from what I understand, these American Jewish groups in Philadelphia started reaching out to people whose job it is to know these things, people at the various Holocaust institutions and these various international anti-Semitic bodies. And they were not anti-Semitic watchdog bodies. And they were basically told that this is garbage, that this is a fringe group that, they were told basically your instincts are correct, that the Waffen-SS is indeed not a good thing. And should not be celebrated. And I think but it's just, to me, it's the gall. It's like, it's not enough for you to sit there and, and go to bat for these people in Ukraine. You have to be exporting this. You have to be standing up for the Waffen-SS. it takes a big commitment. It takes a whole lot of love, to really put yourself out there. And I'm just very grateful that the Philadelphia area Jewish groups, they did the right thing. They checked up on them. They gave them the benefit of the doubt. And yeah. And I was also told there was also a group that's, I don't know what that was purported to be like Soviet ex-prisoners of conscience, that also sent a very similar, letter. Also going to bat for it, but I think I'm just very glad that the most important thing is the Jewish groups didn't bite and the Jewish media didn't bite. You can find things on anybody. You could find Turkey celebrating for Thanksgiving. So you find whatever you want. So it doesn't mean what I always think about is I always think of those barbecue places that have like on the menu they'll have the picture of a pig in an apron and like a chef's hat. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck is the pig happy about? You know what I mean? Eat me, I'm delicious. I can't wait for you to taste me. Like, I can't shake that image every time I see Jews defending the Waffen-SS. You know what I mean? Like, it's just eat me, I'm delicious.
So, today is the anniversary of the Babi Yar massacre,
Yeah.
the largest single shooting during the Holocaust, shooting of Jews. And so while we're talking about Zizzles, could you touch on that, this scandal involving the Holocaust, a monument for Babi Yar that
It's I don't I don't have the full things wrapped up in my head. Okay, but again, it's like Babi Yar is a giant thing. I mean, it's you know the Holocaust was essentially two parts. It was the death camps that's represented by Auschwitz, and it's the Holocaust by bullets, which is so often ignored, which is just taking Jews out in pits and shooting them, invariably with the help of local collaborators. And Babi Yar was when 33,000 Jews were killed in 2 days. Okay, and there's Ukraine is filled with them. I mean, my city Kharkiv has Drobitsky Yar. 15,000 Jews in 2 days. It's just that's how it is. But Babi Yar is the Auschwitz of the Holocaust by bullets, and it's this giant sprawling ravine. Again, 33,000 bodies. You have to put, and it has been the target of so much attempts at perversion from various sides. In 2016, I believe, 2016 and 2017, during commemorations of Babi Yar, the Ukrainian government did this despicable thing, which is they put up a temporary display with the Ukrainian nationalists who assisted the Germans in killing the Jews. These people who ran newspapers with the most vile that egged on Ukrainians to help with this. That after it was enough to kill 33,000 people in 2 days. They afterwards they were running these newspapers saying, beware, there still may be Jews hiding in the city. Be vigilant for any survivors, lest there are any who weren't killed. Okay? And these people, I mean, it just makes my blood boil. These people, then listed them as victims because eventually the Germans got tired of them and they executed them too. These nationalists, and some people say they were killed at Babi Yar. Some people, there's a lot of evidence that they weren't actually killed at Babi Yar. But regardless of wherever they were killed, it would be like putting a memorial to the 9/11 hijackers at Ground Zero, because technically they were killed there too. And the pain of it. And Jewish organizations stood there and they commemorated Babi Yar with this obscene mockery, this perversion of a commemoration. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because Babi Yar does not have an actual museum complex, a comprehensive introduction to what is Babi Yar, what happened there, who killed who were the victims, who were the perpetrators. Okay. And there's this gigantic infighting amid Ukraine, and a lot of it is over attempts to nullify the bloody legacy of the Ukrainian nationalist collaborators, without whom Babi Yar would not have been possible. Okay, and it's a battle over narrative. It's the difference between Holocaust deniers and Holocaust distortionists is that Holocaust deniers deny the Holocaust happened. Holocaust distortionists appropriate the Holocaust. They said, like, of course it happened, and we're victims too. The perpetrators are also victims. They say the Nazis, the Germans are the ones that did everything. Us, we were just as, we were victims too. There's good people on both sides. And compounding all of this is that there were several wealthy men who put forth the plans, and they pledged money to build this complex, to claim Babi Yar, but they're also in various ways tied to Russia. And of course, Russia has been in very bad faith painting all of Ukrainians as Nazis. So it's like these people at Babi Yar just can't rest. Like there's all of these factions. And then, so this wound up basically a battle where there's one side that kind of says like, oh, all Ukrainians are evil and blah, 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 blah. There's a really big side on the other side that says, oh, Ukrainians are also victims. They did not a single Ukrainian helped the Nazis, which is also garbage. And in between are all of these Jewish groups and it's so Byzantine that I really don't even have a full grasp of the latest developments and how it's been going. Okay, but it gets truly bizarre. I remember a while ago there was a very strange man who is rather artistic, who was supposed to, his vision was that like people would come there and like a computer would designate you as being like a Nazi or a victim, and like it was supposed to be this like interactive weird experience. So anyway, and Jews have fallen on different sides of this, and again you have these these groups bickering about it. There's also something very similar happening in Hungary. There's a Hungarian Holocaust type of museum that's been very suspect, because the Hungarian government again wants to make it seem like the Hungarians were just victims and that they weren't responsible for any of this. And there's a very small group of Jews, but a very vocal group of Jews who, for one reason or another, have pitched themselves on the side of the Hungarian government, and who are now speaking out and saying, no, the Jews of Hungary actually think this is great. I wish I could give you more details on the Babi Yar thing, but I don't even have my mind fully wrapped around the latest details to just tell you. But it's just basically, it's emblematic of this fight over this legacy. And it's emblematic of Holocaust revisionism, of the attempts to take and appropriate the Holocaust, and to say that the people who contributed to it were also victims.
But what about Zizzel's and Vod's position? They were taking, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were taking the position that this is essentially like a front for Russian propaganda.
Anybody who was, they were attacking the idea that this project should be encapsulating, including the Ukrainian responsibility for it, the responsibility of the Ukrainian nationalists, who historically are documented and have been there, and they're painting, the only thing these people can do is paint their opponents as Russian propagandists and tied to Russia. Okay, they can't they're defending the indefensible. And the only way you can really do that is by cheap lies and by painting your opponents as Russian propagandists. So, I mean, that's about all I can really say on that. It's just, I guess the biggest thing is I'm just grateful that these people's power appears to have been waning quite a bit, which I'm very thankful for, because for the longest time it was like, I called them Potemkin Jews, okay? It was the same 3 or 4 people who would cycle between various journalists and various, media representatives, and portray themselves, would go from one to the other to portray themselves as, as the representatives of Ukrainian Jews. So, and you would see the same 3 or 4 people just giving interview after interview after interview after interview. because I mean, you could put, I could find two Samoans and create the Samoan organization of the tri-state area and use them to portray every, you know what I mean? Like you could take anything and create this front. So
Well, before moving on, I'll just say, well, for people who might be wondering, well, with this being the Bandera Lobby Show, what does this conversation have to do with the Bandera Lobby? Zizzles was actually one of the leaders of the so-called capitulation resistance movement, which was led by literally what still exists of Stepan Bandera's organization, was spearheading this thing called the capitulation resistance movement, which was itself a faction or just part of a broader movement that I think was really spearheaded by Azov and other far-right extremists against Zelensky, basically threatening to kill him or overthrow him or to, lead a new Maidan-style revolution against him after he was elected if he negotiated some kind of peace with Russia.
well,
And
he was elected on a peace platform. He was elected on a peace platform and anti-corruption platform.
But then when Russia invades,
yeah,
the capitulation resistance movement renames itself the Free Ukraine Resistance Movement, and the leader of it comes out, Andriy Levus, and announces that he's actually the deputy leader of the OUNB, or the Bandera wing of Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists itself, and they create something called the Free Ukraine Battalion, which I almost wonder if it just kind of exists on paper, but Zizzles announced that he was joining this Free Ukraine Battalion, which was itself basically like the OUNB battalion. So I thought that was pretty blatant. But
let me explain one quick thing too. Listen, I remember being in Estonia as a child during, and Estonians, they welcomed Jews and they welcomed everybody during the communist times, because the notion was basically, the Soviet Union was called the prison of nations. Okay, it was all this. I think my dad says like 120 something different ethnicities and nationalities were trapped there. And for a long time, I know this, I don't want to speak for Zizzles, but I do know that he was a political prisoner there. And I know he was in the gulags. He was a prisoner of conscience under the Soviets. And that's something that, despite anything else, I respect that about his past. I very much do. I think a prisoner of conscience is, like I said, it's something to be respected. And there's all these stories about how in the gulags, these various people who were prisoners of conscience, who were just, thrown in from various places, how they formed this camaraderie. And again, I'm not speaking for Zizzles specifically, but I'm speaking in general. Okay. And also in the people on the outside in America, these various groups, these Jewish groups, the Bandera groups, the Croatian, the Ustasha group, they basically view the USSR, and this is true. I mean, listen, if you and I and a bunch of other people just pretend we're in a cage, okay, we're imprisoned in a cage, okay? It doesn't matter if I rattle my side and if I break my side of the cage, you break your side of the cage, or somebody else. The important thing is that the cage is weakened, and if I manage to break my bars, all of us escape. If you break your bars on your side, we all escape. So the idea was, for your freedom and ours, a freedom for one is a freedom for all. And the notion was that, and this is one of the reasons why the Soviet Union was very reluctant to release Jews like myself and my family, is because they knew that if they gave any sort of freedom to the Jews, the next thing the Poles are going to want it, and the Estonians, the Ukrainians, So it was this very strange Cold War thing, and I think it was a very genuine thing, where these people who during World War II might have been murdering each other had this common goal and this common thing. All of them had their culture suppressed. All of them had their languages suppressed. All of them had their history suppressed. And they had this mentality of like, we're in a cage, and I mean, even people were talking about how Yuri Shuhevich, who was, Roman Shuhevich's son, who spent years and years and years in prisons, as unfairly imprisoned. No matter, I mean, I am not a fan of his at all, to put it very lightly, but he was wrongfully imprisoned, for being his father's son, at an early age, before he was even an adult.
I think for refusing to denounce his father, who,
Yeah.
for people who don't know, is the commander of the UPA, Ukrainian Insurgent Army.
And former German Third Reich officer, and the organizer of ethnic cleansing of Poles. So, but whatever it is to say, this person, his father, his son, spent years and years and years and years in prisons, decades, really, I think. And in it, there were, I think, some Jews too, who he maintained at least somewhat of a cordial relationship, or at least as they have spoken, because again, they were all in the same boat. They were all in the same prison, and it was a common enemy. And I think in this particular case, and also this also explains to me, I think, I've written about this in The Nation, I think, or in the Ford, I forget where, but there's a residual one. I think one of the reasons American Jewish groups are reluctant to denounce this, Bandera whitewashing and all of that, is because they still remember the old days when it was all of us against the Soviet Union. And I think some of the older Jewish organization leaders still have that positive feeling when it was all of us against the enemy, all of us, eager for any news about breaking any of the bars of the cage, So, but yeah, there's a weird, it's not just there's history behind, like I said, Estonians, where they were welcoming of Jews, they were welcoming of Armenians, they were welcoming, it was a place where you could go, and I write about it glowingly in my memoir, about how they accepted anybody who was an enemy of the USSR was welcome there. Anybody who was oppressed by the USSR was welcome there. So it's there's a history going back to, and a complicated one as well, in addition to some very strange beliefs of some of these Jewish organizations.
In my last episode of the Bandera Lobby Show, I interviewed John Paul Himka, and I asked him about the responsibility of the Ukrainian diaspora, the organized diaspora, of reintroducing nationalism to Ukraine. And he didn't dodge the question, but he wound up talking more about these Soviet dissidents, and I think the same thing, and how these former Soviet dissidents in 1990s Ukraine become some of the first people to call for the rehabilitation of the nationalist movement, because they had, befriended Ukrainian nationalist UPA, OUN UPA veterans in the Gulag. And yeah, no, it's an interesting dimension of, because when we normally think of blowback in this issue, it's
we don't think of it
both
going the other
sides.
way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you this, and again, I'm not speaking of diasporas in general, but I'm speaking of the ultra-nationalist segment. Other reporters who I've talked to, reporters in Australia, reporters in Europe, have all experiences, many of them have experiences, that the most vicious, the most hardcore people are not in Europe. It's in the diasporas. It's in the North American, Australian diasporas. And I think because, I mentioned before, it's for these people, it never stopped being 1945. Ukraine itself went on and lived on and created, but to these people, it was just 1945 and just never ended. And it became distilled and distilled and distilled. And while things were suppressed in Ukraine, you couldn't be writing materials on Bandera. You would have to be writing it, samizdat, or, the underground press. But for this whole time, the people in Canada and the people in the US were preparing these materials, were preparing these histories, were preparing all of this, that one day were then injected back into Ukraine and were used to restart the cult of Bandera and use this and the cult of the SS Galicia and everything. So in many ways, they were in exile, and they spent that 70 years, whatever, or less. They spent those decades planning, and not just planning, but creating educational programs, which they used on their children and grandchildren in Canada and the US and otherwise, and then when it became when it became possible to put them back into Ukraine, they then introduced them right back into Ukraine and saying, you know what, the Soviets took away your heritage, here's your real heritage, you know? And in some ways they were right. The Soviets did, you know, they were horrible at taking away heritage. They did that for Jews, they did it for so many people. It's just that, you know, the whitewashers have taken a very significant, a small part and a very selectively edited part of the heritage, and then they made it that is the heritage.
Mm-hmm. No, I think the Ukrainian Canadians in particular, and well, other nationalists in the diaspora really think of themselves as the true Ukrainians.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I know there's a dynamic that after the Soviet Union collapsed, and you have, I think, what they call the fourth wave Ukrainians who came after in the 90s, when they would come to, I know the situation in the US and I assume elsewhere in the diaspora, they didn't want these people at the Bandera summer camps because they had the Soviet mindset, and
they were poisoning the children,
and they're different and they're weird. You know, they wear Speedos and socks at the
yeah,
pool, and you
yeah,
know, and
absolutely.
yeah. So it's, I don't think a lot of people are getting this from, or as the moral of the story, but I think it is one lesson to be learned, is that, well, with the Hunka scandal, that you know, the glorification and celebration of these veterans of the Waffen-SS is really a lot more mainstream in the diaspora than in Ukraine. I feel like in Ukraine it's the far right and neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
And
also in Ukraine, it's just a shitload of people who do not think these people are heroes also, you know.
mm-hmm.
Just like in the diaspora there also. But I want to take a tiny say, just to say, if you want to, I don't know if we ever talked about this, but if you want to know a crazy diaspora story, okay, I want to tell you about Silvia Foti, or Foti, okay. Silvia Foti grew up in Chicago in the Lithuanian community. Chicago is the biggest Lithuanian community outside of Lithuania, okay. She grew up as kind of like a celebrity because her grandfather was a hero in the community, okay, and she was the granddaughter of this incredible freedom fighter for Lithuanian freedoms, and anybody who follows the Bandera Lobby blog should get their alarming lights flashing. So she's a wonderful lady. She's raised to this, you know, steeped into this culture, in the church, in the just older people who knew her grandfather, everything about her mother, just, you know, just being filled with these, you know, this passion. Her mother wanted to write this book about her Silvia's mother wanted to write a book about Silvia's grandfather, okay? And she did some, but on her deathbed, she didn't finish the book, and she made Silvia promise. She said, finish this book for me, okay? Okay, of this hero grandfather who fought against the Soviets and who saved Jews and who did everything, okay? And Silvia made this promise. And Silvia is a journalist, a trained journalist, and she's also an English teacher, just, you know, so she has all of this, and obviously fluent in Lithuanian, whatever, okay? And she went out to fulfill this deathbed promise to her mother. And she got the shock of her life when it turned out that her grandfather, she discovered, was not a hero so much as a Nazi collaborator who was directly responsible for murdering Jews, okay? Who collaborated with the Nazis in Lithuania. And so this woman got into, I mean, this is somebody who spent her whole life being told that this was a hero, like in every way, you know, like in this community where he was the hero. And she had zero reason to suspect this, and she had her entire world turned upside down. She's, I think of her as the anti-Chrystia Freeland, because, you know, she didn't have to do anything. She could have just kept quiet, you know. She certainly is not responsible for her grandfather's sins, but she decided to do the opposite. She decided to tell the truth, and she has actually been very outspoken about telling Lithuania that, you know, my grandfather should not be honored, and, you know, we should not be honoring people who collaborate with the Nazis and killed Jews. We should not be doing this. We can do better. And it's been, like I said, a crazy, crazy story. You know what I mean? It's like, you grow up believing somebody's a hero, and it turns out they're like the worst thing you can be, and it's funny, there's even a point in the book in which I remember like her grandmother told her, she was like, she kind of was like dissuading her from pursuing this, and she's, kind of a hints like, you're not going to like what you're going to find, you know so I should, Moz, can you look up, or can we just place this in? We should really plug her book. I think it's it went through a couple of it went through a couple of different titles. I'm going to look it up right now. So Silvia Foti, Storm in the Land of Rain, or it's also, Storm in the Land of Rain. Her name is Foti, F-O-T-I. And that's a crazy story. And again, this is somebody who's just like, so I believe that so many people in the diaspora, in the Ukrainian diaspora and everything, like I said, I really do. Listen, you're raised being told one thing by the people you love and the people you trust. So why would you not believe it? And, that's number one. And number two, nobody wants to kind of deal with the fact, nobody would want to deal with the fact that everything they've been told is a lie. People get defensive about that, understandably so. But yeah, it's, these diasporas are fascinating. I mean, they're just, Australia has a very strong Croatian diaspora and Ukrainian as well. It's just been, it's the UK, obviously. So, but I think Canada takes the ball, takes the cake.
Well, it will be interesting to see the ramifications of all this. And I imagine that this has provided a wake-up call for, like Ukrainian Americans, Ukrainian Canadians who have been sort of misled by this stuff, but they're not so deep into it that they can't be woken up. The Association of United Ukrainian Canadians, which is the progressive Ukrainian organization in Canada, a branch in Edmonton, just released a statement, among other things, calling for the Canadian government to halt funding of Ukrainian Canadian organizations that glorify Nazi collaborators.
Because they have these kids camps too. They have a lot of where a lot of the, as brainwashing happens. And the statues that you found are in Ellenville and in Baraboo, Wisconsin, in New York and Wisconsin. They're in Ukrainian camps for children, and these are the statues of Nazi collaborators.
But the difference is, in Canada, they get money from the government.
Exactly.
So
that's
yeah,
interesting that this is, I didn't know that this statement was put out.
It was just recent. I'll send it to you, and also I'll put that on screen and a link. And maybe we can have someone from that organization on the Bandera Lobby Show soon. Something we didn't get to, though, is in your recent article, you talk about the Canadian Institute for Ukrainian Studies at the University of Alberta, which has, it turns out, been hit pretty hard by this Nazigate scandal in Canada. Can you talk a bit about the university? Because
I'll tell you this. You had a busy day yesterday, and I had a busy day yesterday, but I don't think our day was as busy based on my research. I don't think our day was as busy as the University of Alberta webmasters, who they were scrubbing their website left and right, taking down pages. And here we need to credit Per Anders Rudling, and I really hope you have him on the show. And again, this is somebody who's just in the same class as Himka, in the same, just a brilliant minded expert on this, on SS Galicia in particular, and the Ukrainian World War II nationalists in general. And also, he's the one who's been into this, and he's been attacked in this long before Lev and Moss got into this at all. And he's been subject to vicious campaigns in the diaspora, by the diaspora, to destroy his career and his livelihood. So, and Per is I didn't know this, actually. Did you know he's a proud alum of the University of Alberta? I did not.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I just learned that. I spoke with him last night. Just learned that. But Per actually wrote about this, that this place has scholarships to at least 4 members of the Waffen-SS. Well, they had Hunka, and then my colleague at the Forward, when she reached out to the University of Alberta, they told her that they were giving the money back. And then Per helped us nail down the various other people, members of SS Galicia, who have scholarships there. And I have to admit, my colleague has been like taking the point on this, and I haven't. I think she just emailed me about it, but basically they're going to get back to us very soon. But they have endowments for. I mean, let's the biggest one is Volodymyr Kubeyovich, and this is the man who he did not fight in SS Galicia, but he was the man who was very responsible for creating it. He was the point man between Hans Frank, who was the Governor General of Poland, who was the guy who was hanged in Nuremberg for being responsible for slaughtering, 2 million Jews or something. This is, I mean, the manifestation of evil. So wherever the Germans went, they needed local collaborators to kind of serve as liaisons between them and the local communities. Okay, so they needed that in between layer, and Kubeyovich and his organizations was, they provided that layer, and I mean, one of the darkest things they've done is they've put out warnings telling Ukrainians, do not shelter Jews. Any Ukrainian who will be found helping Jews hide will be subjected to the harshest punishment. Okay, so this is like going out of your fucking way to make sure the Holocaust goes on as planned. Okay, as somebody who just advocated for the seizure of Jewish property, I mean, this is just a horrific person. Okay, and his crowning achievement, and there's all these photos of him simpering to Hans Frank. He had this very Gollum-like appearance, and he's just kind of lurking Gollum-like in the background with Hans Frank. And this man, so he finally, it's been his dream to create a Ukrainian Waffen-SS division, and SS Galicia was the culmination of his dream. And then after his buddy Hans Frank was hanged in Nuremberg, Kubeyovich went to the West, and he settled in Canada, and he enjoyed a happy and healthy life. To the point where, and again, and this is where Canada stands out, in South America is when the Nazis at least kept quiet. In Canada is when people like Kubeyovich fondly wrote books about SS Galicia and his role in establishing it. So the University of Alberta has, and I have to be journalistically careful here, by the time of this broadcast, it may be had in the past, a rather strong endowment for Volodymyr Kubeyovich, who makes, I mean, Hunka is really, as per Anders Rudling told us, is really rather small fry in comparison. Now, one of the others that the University of Alberta had for their Nazi program scholarships, from the Nazi appreciation scholarships, is, and obviously I'm being facetious, but it's, how many Nazi scholarships do you have before it becomes kind of a pattern? The big one that they have is for this man Peter Savarin. Okay, and Peter Savarin was actually a chancellor of the University of Alberta. Okay, so he's somebody who played a crucial role in the actual establishment of it. He's a Waffen in the university. He's a Waffen-SS volunteer. He's an SS Galicia volunteer. And not only do they have a scholarship for him, okay, but they also, I'll put it this way. I was actually shocked when I was looking at the University of Alberta sites. There were things that were being scrubbed, but a couple of things that they did not scrub in time with an announcement of one of these other SS Galicia fellowships. And I was stunned to see that they have a PDF in English and in Ukrainian. And I was very surprised that not just in Ukrainian, but also in English, they admitted that this other person who they set up the scholarship for, was a member of SS Galicia. So I think it just shows you how just how comfortable they were made to feel there. Back in my roundabout thing to Peter's, so University of Alberta is currently, again, I don't want to speak for exactly, I don't know when you're going to air this, but let's just put it, they're in the process of reviewing things. With Hunka, they absolutely confirmed they're giving the money back for his scholarship. With these other ones, they're going to be reviewing it, if they have not already taken them down, or said that they're doing away with it. But And I think they even put out something like a statement like, any students who are concerned about this or who are, who feel the need to get counseling or whatever or something, or I don't have it right in front of me, but it's something to the effect of like, we're working on this and we're concerned and we're taking this seriously. But interesting part is this. In researching Peter Savarin, who was the University of Alberta chancellor, I found out that he was the recipient of something called the Order of Canada. Okay. And the Order of Canada is the country's second highest award. So it's very much up there. It's like, I guess all like Congressional Medal of Freedom-ish type thing. Okay. And it's awarded by the Governor General of Canada, which Canada, still being, I guess, part of the British Empire, has an overseer from the British Crown, and this overseer from the British Crown is what the Governor General of Canada is who makes these awards. I contacted Justin Trudeau's office and I contacted the Governor General's office because the current Governor General of Canada has actually spoken out about the Junta situation, saying there was a shock and an embarrassment. So I contacted Trudeau's office asking his office's take on this guy getting the award, one of the highest honors in Canada. Trudeau's office put me through to the Governor General's office. I've also contacted the Governor General's office, and they're saying they're going to be getting back to me. But I asked them, what their position is on one of Canada's highest honors being given to a member of the Waffen-SS. So there's a lot of interesting, I think there's a lot of things in flux, and I think that, you and I are getting a lot of, I think, well-deserved, I'll toot our own horn, well-deserved, we've been speaking for years and we've been painting as these crazy, Russian propagandists, when all we were just pointing out is that, Nazis are bad and we shouldn't celebrate them and we should face history. I think it's a cathartic moment for us, but I think the most important thing is that, I'll put it this way, like, there's a quote by Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust, the famous Holocaust survivor, who said that, forgetting the dead condemns them to killing them over and over again. If you forget the dead, they continue in this metaphysical sense, getting killed over and over again. And I think that quote, kind of the same statement, applies to the victims, also to the perpetrators. If you just can't move past the perpetrators, Canada is going to be standing there forever celebrating a Nazi. Okay, they're never going to leave that parliament. They're going to be standing there, like incompetent fools clapping for a Nazi in a country that lost 45,000 men fighting against Hitler. And until they finally face it, until they actually stop lying to themselves, they will never leave that parliament. And I very much hope that they're going to be starting, that this is a process that's going to start. And I'm very encouraged by Canadian Jewish groups who are finally speaking out very strongly in this. Some of them have been speaking out for a while, but others are joining in, and I think it's amazing. I'll tell you one thing too. I don't know but there's been talk about like opening up the Deschênes Commission and opening up the archives there. My take is that, the Deschênes Commission was a farce. The very existence of it was a farce. There was this was basically in 1985 they created this commission to look into Waffen-SS Galicia veterans and potential war crimes. The Waffen-SS was a war criminal investigation. Was a war criminal organization ruled by Nuremberg. End of story. 30 years before Donald Trump said there's good people on both sides of this neo-Nazi march in Charlottesville, the Deschênes Commission set out to find out whether, is there such a thing as a good Waffen-SS unit? Let's put our heads together and investigate. I just think it's wrong. I think it's just the existence of it is offensive. Okay. It's like putting investigate. Is there such a thing as a pleasant rape? It's despicable, and I really hope that it'd be interesting to have the Deschênes Commission declassified all of this material. But I think the far more important thing is for Jewish organizations and for anybody who's against this glorification of Nazis to not to not create another Deschênes commission, because you do not need a fucking Deschênes commission or any commission to say that the Waffen-SS is a fucking war criminal organization.
Well, before we wrap up, maybe maybe you want to talk about your project for the forward of mapping out all these monuments around the world.
Yeah, like I said, I was looking at the far right and looking at Ukraine and noticing the Bandera monuments, and then started looking at various places in the world where I saw neo-Nazis and I saw this far right rising, and I saw everywhere there's also monuments to them. And I looked at the Southern Poverty Law Center has a Confederate database of Confederate monuments, and a map, and I thought that we should have one for Nazis and Nazi collaborators, and I wanted it to be in a Jewish newspaper, in a Jewish outlet. I think that's a proper place for it to be there, especially because I wanted to be. I didn't want it to be for Jewish watchdog group. I wanted it to be beyond politics. I wanted it to be just straight information. We found over 1,600 monuments in 30 different countries, including just many in the US, and a lot that you ferreted out for us, Moss, and a lot of other people did. And it was, to me, I wanted it to be more than, David Katz. He's a phenomenal. He's one of the first people who speak out against this. He's Dr. David Katz of the Defending History watchdog groups. He's one of the first to speak about the whitewashing in Lithuania and others, and he paid for it by losing his job. But he in the beginning spoke to me, and he told me, he's like, make sure that this only has the worst people. Make sure it doesn't have anybody who's like, well, he might have saved Jews as well, and even taking all of that out, even taking out the people with a shady, half dark, half light past. And also I wanted to have nothing on human remains. So no grave sites, nothing on even just, a battlefield. Even taking all of that out, and even putting in strict criteria. I also wanted people who hands-on contributed to the Holocaust. So not like the IBM, which is infamous for helping with, their computers and systems, but people who had hands-on contributed to the spread of anti-Semitism, and to even with all that limitation, I still got to like 1,600, over 1,600. And the biggest ones that I was stunned at is I looked at Eastern Europe, where you and I have been focused on, and then and this project has taken 3 years, and incrementally as I've been putting them in. But I was stunned that I didn't think Germany would have a lot of them, and Germany has a ton. I think one of the biggest, most successful propaganda coups in modern history is Germany convincing the world they're really sorry and they're taking this whole Holocaust thing seriously. And
the German ambassador, just to interrupt you real quickly, was among those who clapped for Jaroslav Hunka in Canadian
and
Parliament.
Apparently, and we should be careful investigating it, but apparently there's news that the German government said that the SS Galicia was not necessarily that's something I should be investigating soon too. But yeah, the German was one of them, and Germany is always lecturing other countries about how bad things are, and sometimes they're on the right side of things. But I mean, the biggest thing to me is I've discovered that Harvard and Stanford have scholarships for Alfred Krupp, who was convicted of crimes against humanity and war crimes at Nuremberg. I mean, this guy's like if he's not a war criminal, the word has no meaning. He's literally convicted in Nuremberg. Okay, had 100,000 people in slaves in Auschwitz, just murdered untold amounts. Okay, unrepentant. Served a total of 6 years in prison. For genocide. Okay, I mean, there's people who serve more for having a gun or for robbing a liquor store. Served a total of 6 years before being let out, before getting all of his money back by John J. McCloy, who's the American overseer of Germany, and who was also the enthusiastic proponent of Japanese internment camps. And he also apparently turned out to be one of the people who convinced Roosevelt not to bomb the tracks to Auschwitz. So I guess his career has a decidedly pro concentration camp streak in it. And long story short, so this man was freed. He got back the money he got from arming Germany from genocide, and he created this foundation that started pouring money into all these places and naming them after him. So Harvard and Stanford have scholarships named for a war criminal convicted in Nuremberg, and Harvard also has a fellowship for it. And I reported this in December, so about 9 months ago in the New York Times, and I was, every time I think I'm getting jaded enough, I guess maybe this is a good thing, but I wind up being surprising myself with my naivete. I thought that a New York Times article would be enough to get Harvard and Stanford to take these things down, and I was incorrect. Because they just barely did anything, and by barely I mean they didn't do anything. Okay, and especially, and this is the crazy part, Harvard's president at the time is the son of an Auschwitz survivor. Okay, so you have this president in Harvard, and the endowment goes back to 1974, so he was not there when they gave the money, but doesn't matter. Point is, you have a president who's the proud son of a survivor in Auschwitz, whose university contains a fellowship and a university chair for a man who had 100,000 slaves at Auschwitz. I mean, talk about separating personal and professional life. It's so, yeah. But I'm very grateful that I have the backing of the places that I write for, because without it, you can't do anything. And just as much, I'm so great. I mean, you've kept me sane. You've helped keep me sane, Moss, for many, many years. And just as people like Per, Anders, and others, who's it's after a while, it's like gaslighting. You're just kind of like, what I mean? Like I would email and be like, Moss, Nazis are still bad, right? Like, it's not just me, right? Like Nazis are not good, right? But just checking it, So, and you have an amazing capacity for research, you're a phenomenal researcher. So I think I think we should take this week to celebrate a little bit, because Canada is finally it's doing what it needs to do. It's and more than anything, I think it's just the justice to the victims. I mean, it's like, these people killed a lot of people who don't even have graves. And I think if we can just learn a little bit about them, I think it's not about Hunka, it's not about him, it's about his victims, and I think if we can shed light on these things, I think it's important. And I'm proud to be a part of it with you, man. And I hope that the people who are listening go and they check out your blog, they check out the articles, they check out anything. So because this is not so much history, it's fluid, it's still there, and it's part of the story that we tell about ourselves and about the world.